Howdy, partners, and welcome to another episode of the Howdy Partners podcast, where we give you tactical insights that you can deploy in your job so that you can be successful within partnerships. We're joined with Chris Lavoie today, the legendary. So, Chris, tell us about who you are, what you're working on, and then we'll dive into things.
First things first, thrilled to be here today with you fellas. Always enjoy our conversations, so thanks for having me. So Chris Lavoie here, based in Toronto, Ontario. I'm in the ecosystem strategy and training space. So really that focuses on supporting B2B SaaS companies, advising them on their strategy of how do they go to market, particular emphasis on technology partnerships, which is a big focus of what we're going to discuss today. And then the other piece that I'm really passionate about is training. So I focused a lot in 2023 on understanding where are the gaps that exist within SaaS companies with respect to the training that they offer to their partner managers, the ICs in partnership roles. It's pretty alarming to see how large those gaps are. And so that's a big focus for me right now is working with program leaders, managers, directors, VPs on how to implement some V1 training program for onboarding and ongoing training, but more importantly, working directly with those ICs themselves. So I have a few initiatives that I've been working on that cater to that, helping them prepare for a role that really many of us just fell into, and there's not much in the way of robust training available.
I love it. And in 2022, behind the scenes a little bit, you and I were working on a full course for this. So we definitely have some history, and I love to see that you are living through it in that educational piece. I've taken my path into more of the media and content and whatnot. But that still really holds true to something that aligns with me. And I think that's why we vibed so well when we would meet up and riff on these things. So I'm excited that you're seeing success in it and you're continuing to put out that good into the world. So our topic today is tech partnerships and how to monetize them, the integration partnerships, an app marketplace strategy, everything from sourced, influenced, and rev share we're going to dive into today. So Chris, my first question is, what do most get wrong about monetizing tech partnerships? They may think about rev share is most important, or I need to get leads, and I think it can lead to bad habits. But what do you think most get wrong about monetizing tech partnerships?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think to preface it, I know a lot of program leaders, C-suites, where they're like, how is it possible that our technology partner program is so unproductive relative to, say, our channel, our agency program? Given that, tech partners, the huge advantage they present is this giant TAM, right? So your average tech partner is going to have 10x, 100x, potentially 1,000x a number of prospective qualified customers for your business, as opposed to, say, a boutique agency that maybe does digital marketing design. So it's frustrating for a lot of company leaders that their tech partner program isn't as productive as it should be. And so to answer your question directly of what many get wrong is, I think it comes down to picking the partners that you're going to prioritize. And with that, I believe a huge mistake I see is program leaders, partner managers confusing TAM, total addressable market, with SOM, which is the serviceable obtainable market. And to break that down, it's very easy to be mesmerized when you log into Crossbeam or Reveal and you look at the account overlap data with some of your larger tech partners, and you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be rich, right? Because they have so many seemingly qualified customers, right? And that's the TAM, that's the total market you could capture if you were to bring on all of those customers. But that is far-fetched to only focus on that number. And so what you see happen too often is companies and program leaders and partner managers are using that metric, sometimes that metric alone, in order to decide which partners to prioritize, which is of course a flawed approach because it says nothing about your ability to capture those customers, that market, right? So that's why something like a SOM, serviceable obtainable market, is a much more important metric to look at, which factors in things like, okay, sure, this partner company presents a large TAM to us, but are they selling to a similar buyer persona, right? So potentially your partner is selling to CMOs and VPs of marketing, but you're actually selling to chief operating officers and logistics managers, right? So that's already going to chip away at the TAM that's available for you, because it's going to be difficult to sell and say co-selling and ABM style campaigns. Another important consideration in determining SOM is, what's the pool of sellers at your tech partner organization? Me and Will have talked a lot about this. I call it the ideal refer profile, or IRP, meaning customer-facing employees, right? So potentially a partner who is presenting this large TAM, they in fact only have a handful of account executives or customer success managers, and these are people who are actually going to be referring you business. And so if they don't have that many reps to work with, that again is going to really put a dent in that TAM that you can capture. Whereas, one partner might present a smaller overall TAM, but they sell to the same buyers that we do. They have a crap ton of AEs and CSMs that I can work with. They have a mature partner program and are willing to reciprocate and see us as a big, opportunity, just like we see them as an opportunity. So this soliloquy is to say that what I see most partners get wrong is they're lazy in their assessment of who is a priority, and they're looking too much just at this gross TAM number, and they're not actually thinking enough about what's their ability to capture that market. And that includes factoring in a lot of the considerations I mentioned, but also auditing their own existing resources, right? Flipping your own couch cushions and saying, do I even actually have the tools and ammunition to go get that market? So that's where I'd start.
There's a lot to unpick there, and a lot of really, really great info. And so I think the SOM definition is a phenomenal one. And so Chris, from a tactical perspective, if you've got a partner manager, are you doing that SOM analysis when you're recruiting a partner? Whereabouts in that process does that kind of evaluation happen, in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer in two parts. So if you're in the business of taking on net new partners, this is something that I'm looking at very early on in my discovery phase. Because something I'll also talk about later on is, in terms of trends, is programs need to completely redefine and shrink their definition of who is an actual partner, because you just can't afford to be working with as many partners as you have been. So to that point, if you're in the discovery phase, first things first, you just want to make sure they're qualified. Is there a need? Potentially an integration has been requested. That's a good starting point. You're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, but then you need to ask these really important questions, right? So I'll start with analyzing TAM, and if that's sufficiently high, typically 10x whatever my annual goal is, I'll move forward. But then as quickly as I can, I'm stack ranking them based on something like the SOM. And you might be a qualified partner, but you have a small SOM, a small realistic opportunity. So potentially I'll put you into a non-managed bucket that will nurture and onboard and a low-touch, no-touch sequence, versus another partner who presents a large SOM. I'm going to put you in a managed strategic bucket where it's we are going to place a specific goal on you, and we're going to try to activate you as fast as possible.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, yeah, there's so much. And so that you mentioned a couple of factors that kind of feed into that SOM, right? You mentioned partner team, you mentioned ICP. Does either one of those factors have a higher weighting in your opinion? Does any kind of factor? So for example, let's just say one partner, large sales team, but doesn't sell to the right ICP. Is there one factor that outweighs the other, so to speak, when you're considering SOM?
Yeah, really important question. So one thing I didn't mention that is, in my opinion, the most important thing is value creation through the partnership for your shared customers. And this applies to agency to tech partnerships. It applies to agency, but it certainly applies to tech companies when there's an integration involved. Meaning, you could have a partner company who presents this massive amount of TAM, and you might even believe that your ability to capture it is pretty strong given XYZ considerations. But if the integration is so and it doesn't move the needle for your shared customers, it's not highly marketable, you're never going to get off the ground, and you're going to waste an insane amount of resources. So that is by far the most important to me. And let's just assume that that's a check mark. It's yep, some serious value being created from two companies coming together to form an integration. To be honest, the next thing for me is, how many sales and success reps do they have? I really do believe that would be the second most important thing to me after joint value creation. That's more important to me than buyer persona overlap, ICP overlap, partner program maturity, because to be honest, if your partner has a lot of customer facing reps, they don't even need to have a partner program per se. You just need to get access to those reps to really evangelize those relationships. So that's my personal approach.
So for those integration partnerships, so let's say they pass the SOM analysis. What is the first critical step that partner managers should take? So you mentioned, if they have a large sales or CSM team, you can start evangelizing the relationships there. But what is that critical step? Let's say I am, thrust into a new role and they say, we got these integrations, or, the product team says, hey, we just built this integration. And now you're trying to kind of backtrack as a partner manager to now action that. What is that critical step that a partner manager should take after an integration is built?
Yeah, great question. And I remember I provided a quote for Alloy. They were doing a report on this, and they asked me, what's the biggest challenge for integration programs? And, a big focus was, it's hard to get integrations built. That's the big bottleneck, is just convincing your company or your partner's company. And of course, that's a significant challenge. But my slightly controversial comment was, that's tough. But what I find is even more challenging, and to answer your question, is what happens after an integration is built. And it's really driving adoption of it, right? And so that's where I would start, because you need to understand the value, right? I see too often, and I know because I made this mistake myself, is you're like, great, new integration. You feel like that's like the green light to launch all of your go-to-market activities, these advanced enablement exercises with your partner reps. And then the smart reps on your partner companies are like, great, like, what's the value? And you're like, well, I mean, I just told you all the use cases, like, isn't that enough? And they're like, no, like, where's the tangible value? Where's the data, the evidence that's our shared customers are benefiting by XYZ when they use our integration? And then we're just standing there like, crap, we don't have that data. And you can't have that data unless you're driving usage and then actually analyzing those accounts. And so to answer your question explicitly, first step for some promising new integration is to really focus on driving adoption. And this is some tough love for the tech partner managers who might be listening, where you're like, it's not my job to drive adoption. I'm only gold on closed revenue. Well, it's like, guess what? You can't drive revenue from your partners effectively until you have a value added integration. And you can't know that until you've driven installation, right? And I'm giving tough love because I was given that tough love, because Lord knows I complained like heck to my previous managers for the same reason. But I eventually understood that there's dominoes that need to fall in order to really, convert TAM into SOM. And that only happens when you have an integration that is being used and you understand that it's valuable.
And I think it's interesting that you bring this up, because I was talking to somebody about app marketplace listings the other day, like what should be included in an app marketplace listing. And I think for me, the most impactful piece of collateral you can have in there is a joint case study, which is like an actual customer that's using the integration and the value proposition that they're getting from it. And to your point, Chris, like, if you're a good sales rep, the question I would ask is like, oh, can you tell me one of our customers that's using this integration? That would be my first question, right? And if you haven't got that, it's all nebulous at that point, really, to be totally honest. And so I love the point that you just made there. And like I said, this conversation I said, you need to get a joint case study with real ROI in there, and people will start to take notice. So I think that's a really, really, really great point.
It's the holy grail of every integration partnership, is a true joint customer case study centered around the integration. It's not just fluffy. You're basically just reiterating what the use cases are and what the expected benefits are. It's like, no, it's like cold, hard cash in the bank for our shared customer. Here's how they use the integration. That's really important, because it lowers barriers for potential net new buyers, but it has as much data as possible. And again, you can't build something so powerful like this unless you have data around usage. Hence the need to really focus on that. And that requires really heavy collaboration with your customer success team and customer marketing team.
So now that, let's say we have that built, we have the joint story, we're getting some activity. I know that when you and I have chatted before, you have good examples of rev share and when it works. And there's, I feel like even still some lack of knowledge around where rev share actually matters, where some people say it doesn't matter at all. It's only for affiliates. That's really when they care about it. But yep. I know that you have an example of where that is the main source of value that you can give to your partner when there may be not this, give and take that you could do equally. Tell us about when rev share matters and the example where it actually benefited the relationship and drove activity within the partnership.
Yeah, really good question. So, rev share as it pertains to tech partner programs is certainly different than it is for agency partner programs. So the preface there is, look, like for agency partner programs, it's difficult oftentimes to send them leads back, right? And so if you're going to stand up that relationship and motivate them, you're going to need to put some skin on the game and give them a percentage, typically in perpetuity or on a fixed year basis. And so that's a main instrument for driving value to agency partners. In tech, my approach has always been to avoid rev share relationships as much as possible. And my goal is just to commit to some equitable referral exchange, which isn't just, I send you 10, you send me 10, right? It's really based on the metrics. So it's like, what's your average contract value? What's your average close rate? What's your goals? And so potentially I only need to send a specific partner 3 reps or 3 referrals that lead to sales accepted leads in a quarter. And maybe they need to send me 10 based on our goals and average contract value. So that's always been my approach. I think it can be a useful instrument even for technology partner programs when there is just a natural gravity or funnel for one company based on where they sit in a customer stack relative to the partners to send a high volume of leads organically, right? But it doesn't happen both ways, right? So meaning partner A can send partner B a lot of referrals based on where they sit in the tech stack selling to the same buyer persona, but it doesn't happen the other way around because, you don't want to just, capture no value from that relationship if you're the side who's sending all of those leads. So put that partner on a rev share agreement. We did this with a few partners where this activity was happening this way. And what's great is, rev share income that you get from partners, it should never be confused with ARR or net new revenue. And I don't like when I see programs like boasting so heavily about like the rev share they're getting, because at the end of the day, that just goes into your company bank account. It's not recurring revenue. It doesn't contribute to your quotas or goals, and it shouldn't. But the way I looked at it is like, once it started to become significant, I'm like, oh, okay, I can actually, make the case with my finance leadership team. It's like, hey, look, like I just generated $250,000 in rev share income last year. Like that should contribute to my own personal department's P&L sheet. And I use that to justify strategic hires that I made, right? So one hire in particular I made, I was able to do because I was able to offset their salary based on the rev share income I was getting. So yes, it's not a recurring revenue generator per se, but it can help stimulate partnership activities if you're able to start with that. And more importantly to me, I was able to justify hiring expenses because I was able to offset it with the income we were getting from rev share.
Yeah, I love where they sit in the tech stack. Like the SaaS buying river is how I've always referred to it as, like who comes upstream and downstream of you. And I love the piece of like, if it's a natural flow and you're always going to send leads over, then why shouldn't you get a decent amount of revenue from there? So I love the way that you've kind of parceled then into a couple of boxes, because my thinking is similar to yours in terms of technology partnerships, which is rev share is not going to move the needle from either side. Leads are, right, which are going to convert into closed opportunities. But I do love the concept of, if there's a natural flow and they're always going to send us leads, well then why wouldn't you in addition be able to get revenue from that partnership? So I think that's a great kind of concept for sure.
Exactly.
So where does influence revenue sit in all of this? There's definitely been, I guess, this year especially, I feel like there's been more of a focus on sourced, and people are saying you shouldn't care about influence. But I know that you've dealt with this in the past, and it's provided actual value for the program. So tell us your argument for influenced revenue.
Yeah, for sure. This is a polarizing topic that I could spend a whole session on. So to be clear, I think influence should always be a primary consideration for partner programs, meaning you should have some playbook, so to speak, on how to solicit influence from partners on key deals, get material influence, track that influence, and understand it. I'll start things off by saying I think program leaders need to be very careful about how they goal and comp and quota their ICs, right? And I don't think any one individual should own an entirely 100% influence goal, because I think that doesn't motivate and incentivize the right behavior, because what you're going to have is double counting happening, right? So you're going to have this partner manager is goaled on influence revenue, and they're going to get paid bonuses, but then someone had to, source that pipeline in the first place. They're getting bonused, and then the sales reps have to close that deal, and then they're getting bonused, and so is the manager. So you can quickly erode your margins when you're paying out on top of funnel metrics, not just closed sourced revenue. So I'll say that, but I do think it has a huge place in, really creating a productive partner program. I think it's particularly important for long, complex sales cycles that have big ACVs attached to them, right? So if you're an SMB, quick sales cycles, influence isn't as relevant, because you could spend a lot of time getting material influence on a deal that maybe was already going to close anyway, because it has a high close rate. It's a small deal amount. It's not really worth it. But if you start getting into the 25, 50, 100K, $1 million deals that have, 3, 6, 12-month deal cycles, inevitably you're always going to need influence, at which point you certainly should have a very robust process for going and looking for the influence, getting the influence, tracking the influence, quoting and comping your reps on it. I've seen some really cool models where, say a partner manager has a goal of $100,000 of closed revenue in a given month or quarter. They can get up to 50% of that attributed to influenced revenue, right? So maybe they were able to influence 50K closing, and then the other 50K came from net new sourced revenue. So there's some flexible models you can do there. But I think the key is I would avoid making it a major contributor or the exclusive quota element for, say, a partner manager, just because you don't want to incentivize, behavior that isn't focused on sourcing net new business. And I think for long, complex sales cycles, the big ACVs, it has a really important place.
Yeah, and this speed point is a really interesting one, because it's definitely like not an argument, but definitely a heated conversation I've had with VPs of sales before, whereby an AE's been engaged in a deal, a partner has come in mid-stage and maybe gave them an additional contact or an additional champion, which has helped the sales cycle along. But again, I think it's always difficult to explain to a VP of sales that did actually influence the sales cycle, because their opinion is, hey, we're already engaged there, we generated the lead, and we ended up closing it, right? And so I don't know if you can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's that. So that's what I forgot to mention. So thanks for that. Is the most important thing you need to do is tracking things. So certainly avoid putting any quotas on things until you actually understand what's going on. So the real quick, one of the last things I built out at Gorgeous was our partner influence motion. So we had a very specific playbook for sales reps to basically break glass in case of emergency when their deals were going dark. I had a junior partner manager on my team who would be alerted when a deal was flagged as needing help. They had a very specific process for going to find the right partners who could potentially help, engage, connect them with our sales rep, get the influence, track it by type, because we had different types of influence. And then after about 4 months, we had enough data where we're like, okay, we can say definitively that across this 4-month period that let's just say 100 deals were flagged by sales reps as needing help. So for 100 deals, they broke glass and said, hey, we need help. For the deals that actually got help from a partner, so they were partner influence, versus the deals who needed help but didn't get the influence they needed, we had a 22% higher close rate on those at-risk deals that got the help they needed versus the ones that didn't, right? And so this was beautiful data that we were like, okay, now this is legit. Now we're very much incentivized to go continue doing this. And now with this type of data, you can factor it into, say, quotas, because based on this data, you'd be like, okay, influence revenue is equivalent to about 20% closed ARR, right? So if say a partner manager was able to successfully influence a 10K deal, perhaps they deserve 2K of it, because we understand now that influence is equal to approximately 20% in terms of close rate. So that's the need for data is so important.
And I think you did something really smart there, which is you've actually got the rep to flag that they need help, right? And so there's evidence there to say, hey, they told us they needed help on this deal. We provided the help. And so it does give you that kind of fallback data point to your point, to the point you made in terms of like, we're not just making this up that we influence the deal. Your rep requested, he provided the help, and then it helped them close. So I kind of love that as a tactic for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, whenever you do cross-functional things like this, getting influence, getting your partner reps to send leads, like we would turn it into case studies, right? And so to be honest, like it was a slog to get this program off the ground. And then one time we had one of our star AEs, she was able to close this 50K deal, which is like 10x bigger than our average deal size, because one particular partner came through in the clutch and provided a ton of intel, ton of influence. And we closed this deal, and this person unsolicited, this AE, without even me being involved, goes into our company wins channel, makes this big post celebrating the deal closing, and like highlighted, the junior PM on my team for offering such amazing influence. And all of a sudden, this is our case study, right? This is our internal case study. And all these AEs like, what? Like, how can I get in on that action? How can I have partners help me with my deals? And like, it's one thing to hear from me telling AEs this, but when they see one of their peers, right, benefit from it, the FOMO just, took off. And so that was like the inflection point for us, was just having our first big win that we could document and then evangelize the rest of the sales team on.
That is amazing. And we've heard that multiple times on like the success stories in having these conversations on the podcast. I was just thinking while you were talking about that, I was like, that needs to be its own episode of how do you operationalize, that breaking the glass and, getting into the weeds of that. So we will have an episode 2 on that. And that was a good like carrot to dangle as well for that story. Chris, take us home in, let's say, 1 minute. What is your tactical tip that partner managers can implement tomorrow or, the next day after listening to this? What is that tactical tip?
It's going to be today. If you're listening to this advice needs to be implemented today. Two things, and I flirted with both of them during this podcast. So one is redefining and shrinking your definition of a partner and really adopting this ruthless prioritization, right? Meaning, don't be so liberal in giving up your calendar invites. Really think critically about which partners deserve your time and attention and resources. Probably 20% of the companies you think are your partners that are in your portfolio are actually worth partnering with and focusing on. And you're going to have some tough conversations as your goals go up and you need to shrink your focus, talking to these partners saying, hey, look, based on XYZ, based on, the trends with our partnership not being as productive as we would like, and I take culpability there as well, I can't prioritize you and I really just can't work with you right now. But my goal is to get back to a place where we can, right? So you're going to have some tough conversations. Less is more. And then the other piece I also flirted with earlier was, ICs, programs in general, need to start thinking about enablement, not from the company perspective, like how can I enable this whole company? You need to think about it from an individual perspective, right? So again, who are those sellers? What is the ideal refer profile? So who are the roles and job titles within your partner organizations who can refer you into deals, right? And how can you ultimately earn your way into getting, really exclusive access to these reps so you can evangelize them, establish these authentic one-on-one relationships? And their goal really with tech partners specifically, because they do have so many customers, is 2 to 3 champions per partner, right? So think about that. So you have 10 partner companies in your portfolio. If you can legitimately evangelize and get 2 to 3 champions per those companies, all of a sudden you don't just have 10 companies referring you business, you have like 20 to 30 mini companies, which are these employees themselves who can refer you business consistently. And that's really all you need. That's an oversimplification, but start thinking about it from an individual basis and what enablement materials and resources and spiff programs you need for those individual reps, not necessarily just for the company as a whole.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your wisdom. And like we talked about, we're going to have you on again.
Love it.